Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of JL Del Rio, helping companies do business in Mexico, we'd like to thank you for joining today's webinars. And first of all, our apologies, as there seems to have been some confusion due to clock changes in the US, which we haven't caught up on yet. Today with us are Jesse Torrance, CEO of Startup Guadalajara, and Bernardo Del Rio, our managing partner here at JL Del Rio. As some of you may already know, Guadalajara is currently experiencing an explosive growth and increasing importance in the tech industry, which is why we feel it's important to let companies know what the city has to offer and how they can benefit the most from it. This is why we've created TechSmex, which is a series of specialized webinars that will shed light on everything you need to know in order to set up operations and scale your company globally from Guadalajara, Mexico's Silicon Valley. And this first webinar will present a general overview of why tech companies should set up or consider setting up in Guadalajara. We'll have a few minutes at the end of the session for some questions if you have any, so please feel free to submit as we're going along. So as I mentioned, today's speakers are Jesse Torrance, CEO of Startup Guadalajara, and Bernardo Del Rio, managing partner of JL Del Rio. Jesse, thank you for joining us today. Welcome. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. Great to be here. And thanks, everybody, for joining us, wherever you happen to be calling in from. We're very excited about this kickoff here. Seems like we have a pretty large, somewhat international collection of folks, so that's great. Again, I'm Jesse Torrance, I'm CEO of Startup GDL. We are a nonprofit organization based in Guadalajara in the state of Jalisco, Mexico. And our main mission is to help fast-growing high-tech startups scale globally from Guadalajara. We also support local entrepreneurs in building world-class tech companies, and we also work in the school systems with youth to inspire local youth to become future tech leaders and innovators. I'm from the U.S. originally. I grew up in Ohio, lived in the West Coast, the East Coast, different parts of the U.S. and all around the world, about 4 or 5 countries. And now I work between Chicago and Guadalajara, and we'll be actually permanently relocating to Guadalajara later this year with my wife and family. So we're quite excited, and we've been deeply immersed in Guadalajara and everything that's happening. So I come as an outsider, but a convert to what's happening. It's incredibly exciting. I'm also here, by the way, with one of my colleagues, Cindy Blanco, who's managing director of Startup GDL. She's born and raised in Guadalajara. She's a Tapatía, as they call themselves. Tapatio is the local name for folks from there. They have a strong pride, and you'll see why soon. She's contributed quite a bit as well, along with JL Del Rio's team. So Laura, I think probably the best place to start is really what's the goal here. It's simple. We want to share with you why so many tech companies, especially IT startups, are migrating to Mexico and particularly to Guadalajara, and how you can explore this option for yourself. And it'll be, as we've mentioned, first of several steps on that path, deeper and deeper information sessions. We're especially enthusiastic to do this because Startup GDL was really born out of the experience of one particular company and one such entrepreneur named Bismarck Lepe, who's a fairly well-known investor and entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley area, who founded Uyala several years ago, a video platform company that was sold for quite a bit and did well, and then allowed him to start a second company called Wiseline, which is a software development company that does a lot of AI-related software products. And both those companies had such great success working from Guadalajara and expanding their teams from there. They saw the potential to do this for other companies from Silicon Valley and all around the world, and therefore created Startup GDL as an independent, separate nonprofit that works closely with them to basically replicate that idea. Let's get a lot of other great companies down there, make it easy for them, work with wonderful partners like JL Del Rio that has been doing this a long time for a lot of other companies. And in doing so, create a win-win. The companies grow and the local ecosystem grows. So that's what we're trying to do today. And I'll give you kind of a short overview of the major aspects we want to cover and why Guadalajara has been such a dynamic scene here in the last few, really, decades. There's several main reasons, really, if you break it down. Guadalajara goes back several generations, really, about 40 years almost, in its history of supporting tech. It started with Kodak and Motorola, HP, Intel, Oracle, Bosch, you name it. They've all began to, the large tech companies migrating down there. That's been combined with a really visionary sort of public leadership and policy environment that created wonderful incentives for businesses. The leaders in the public system really get this. They're committed to making it work for companies. So that's going to create a really fertile environment. You couple that with the wonderful institutions of higher education. There's 60 some in the state. There's at least 8 in Guadalajara, and almost 10,000 engineers a year coming out of the university just in Guadalajara. You have an incredible pool of human talent and capital. So we'll talk more about that later, but the basic highlights here we're going to get into is there's been a long history in Guadalajara of these business-friendly policies, a collaborative, forward-thinking, visionary public leadership. It's got a strong, diversified, local, business-friendly policy and economy. It's got this educational and physical infrastructure as good as anywhere on the continent. And the last thing I would say, it's this long cultural, economic, and geopolitical history with the U.S. has made it, like the rest of Mexico, a real gateway and bridge to the rest of Latin America and the Spanish-speaking world. All that coupled with it's a wonderful place to live, perfect weather year-round, culturally rich, and really affordable. So yeah, it's much more than the tequila and mariachis and great beaches. You know all that already, but we're going to give you some of the inside scoop about the secret of the tech scene there.
Thank you, Jesse. So as Jesse mentioned a little, this webinar will go over general aspects. So we're going to start with a general overview of Mexico and Guadalajara. We'll talk about Guadalajara's strategic geographic location, its infrastructure, the pool of talent that we have here in Guadalajara, the manageable immigration rules, its affordable cost of living and office space, and its growing multicultural environment.
Thank you, Laura. Before we start on this GDL 101, I just wanted to mention one quick thing, and that is this series of webinars and coming to Mexico and making a successful business is not just for the Oracles and HPs and even the Uyalas and the Wise Lines of the world. Just as a note, and to concentrate minds, we have a client that has 2 people. So a 2-person software-related enterprise sets up in Mexico. So the universe and who this applies to is very, very broad. Now, getting into, to give you a general overview of when you're talking about Mexico, what are we talking about? Mexico is the 2nd largest economy in Latin America and growing. It's right below Brazil, but richer than Brazil, way above Argentina, Colombia, etc. It's the world's 15th largest exporter. The value of its exports exceeds those of all other Latin American countries combined, which is pretty huge. The country has very responsible macroeconomic management, so that means inflation is low, like low as in 3–4%. And one other item that we find is interesting, Jalisco is the only state in Mexico that has a ministry of innovation. So there's actually a ministry, a secretarial level of innovation dedicated to everything that has to do with innovation, and the secretary is very accessible. Now, Guadalajara is the 2nd most populous metro area in Mexico. It's the 10th largest city in Latin America in population. In 2007, Guadalajara was ranked by FDI magazine as having the strongest economic potential of any Mexican city and the 2nd highest behind Jesse's hometown, soon-to-be ex-hometown of Chicago, of any North American city, and the most business-friendly city in Latin America. GDL was named the American Capital of Culture in 2005, an educator city in 2006, and the first smart city in Mexico by IEEE in 2013. One of 4 cities worldwide selected as a cluster smart city for pilot. It was selected as the venue for the first digital creative city of Mexico and Latin America. This digital creative city is a concept that there are various in the world, and this has a lot to do, I think, with movies and cartoons. So it's like a lot to do with graphic. And We have very important cultural events in Guadalajara. We have the International Film Festival, the International Book Festival. Like the Book Festival, I think, is the second largest in the world. A large number of concerts throughout the year. We have Campus Party. We also have the World Rally Championship in Leon, so for people that like driving fast cars and bad roads, that would be the World Rally Championship. We have the Hot Air Balloon Festival, the Cervantino Festival, so a whole bunch of things.
Thank you, Bernardo. Jesse, do you have anything else you would like to add on the subject of the overall view of Guadalajara and Mexico itself?
Just a couple fine points about the Guadalajara scene there with the smart cluster city and the creative digital city. They're quite extraordinary projects that are in the works as we speak. We have first set of companies have actually started to move down there into those clusters, those new urban clusters designed for tech and sort of creative digital enterprises. This is built around this smart city, smart building design. It's a city designed with multiple Wi-Fi connections throughout the whole city, an urban command center that kind of coordinates it all, everything from the traffic lights to the internet, for the buildings. It's quite extraordinary. It's modeled on the best in the world. MIT was strongly involved in this design process, and it's designed to really reach all the citizens as well. And it's a very much of a citizen collaboration platform. There's street-level urban services from smart parking and smart traffic, as I said, smart lights. So it's quite extraordinary. And the Ciudad Creativa Digital, the creative digital city, is kind of a main flagship project out of that entire citywide effort, where they're going to cluster creative industries, TV, cinema, advertising, video games, digital animation, interactive multimedia, e-learning. It's quite extraordinary. So that, coupled with all the software, IT boom, plus all the other industries that have already been there all along in high tech, it's quite an extraordinary path that they're on.
Thanks, Jesse. Strategic geographical location. Non-stop flights to, from over 50 cities. And I know this because I have toddlers, so we value those direct flights. And there's a great flight to San Jose, great airport. You're in, you're out. I think it's 2.5 hours, something like that. Atlanta, Austin, which is a new flight, very convenient. Chicago, Fresno, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, New York. There's usually a 2-hour time difference with Pacific. Now you guys got ahead of us and changed before we did. Huge choice of daily flights, 1-hour flights to Mexico City. In regards to infrastructure, and maybe this isn't so interesting for software companies, but we do have 48 industrial parks, 3 technological parks, 1 software park, 1 multimedia park, an automotive industrial park, and 3 new urban development projects with a strong tech focus. Talent is always what drives most industries, and looking for that correct source of talent. We have universities with excellent engineering programs. So we have the Tecnológico de Monterrey, we have the UTESO, we have Universidad Panamericana, that's opening a cutting-edge systems engineering program, Universidad de Guadalajara. So just as a ballpark, in 2014, Mexico produced 113,000 engineers versus 120,000 in the US. Guadalajara's universities graduate nearly 10,000 engineers a year. Mexico is the 8th in the world, 113,944 graduates in engineering, according to the World Economic Forum's Human Capital Report. Guadalajara's renown attracts outside talent, and we're seeing this all over. Like, it's bringing in people from all over Mexico. Currently, over 25,000 engineers working in Guadalajara's ITC sector, not including business process outsourcing and manufacturing. And this is just a little graph so that you can see what the progression has been of graduation of engineers. And the next one, and we'll be sending the material anyways, so you can have this as a reference. The number of computing grads per year, so it's 13,000 according to 2012. Now, Guadalajara is pushing to educate students as of an early age. For example, Code GDL, pilot program by Startup GDL, our co-speakers, with local secondary schools and tech companies for students who want to learn more about CSS, Java, and other programming languages. We'll reach 10,000 students by 2020, so that's really a great project that you have there. And if you run into any issues, don't panic. There is Startup GDL that will be there to help and guide, and they speak computer, like I speak accounting, but they speak computer, and so they can talk to you and help with real world experience of the how-to, not just on the financial side or the tax side, but on the operational side. And also, of course, Guadalajara has excellent headhunters as well. Talented yet affordable. These are just some examples of base salaries. These are monthly. And one thing to note, and I think that's interesting and should be more so going forward, is that venture capital is a lot of what backs tech startups. And one important thing is your burn rate becomes a whole lot lower if you can work, or part of what you're doing you can do in a lower cost jurisdiction, then your burn rate goes down. And so as a venture capitalist, that makes sense to ask your companies, how are we doing this in order to get the best bang for our buck?
Thank you, Bernardo. Jesse, what are your thoughts regarding talent down here?
Well, I've been pretty impressed, to be honest. I came in with an outsider's skeptical eye, and when I saw immediately at Wiseline first, and then the other tech companies that were already there, quite a few that I didn't realize were there, and new ones that are coming every day, looking for that talent, is that they, number one, these talented folks, mostly young engineers, but there's also sales, marketing, support staff, and even a few that are really in the managerial ranks, although that's slightly harder to find, but they are there. But especially among the engineers that come out hungry, ready to work, they are, they're not PhDs right out of Stanford, you know, the honest truth. So they're not going to, on day one, start writing, you know, world-changing code, but within about, you know, ramp-up period of a few weeks to a few months, they're as good as any we found anywhere in the world, and they're loyal, because there's not a whole lot of other games in town like Silicon Valley. There's, you pay $100,000 a year for an engineer, and he or she'll leave in 3 to 6 months for the next company because there's 100 Amazons and Facebooks there. Here it's a new environment, and that creates an incredible opportunity for them and for companies. So once we get them in and they're trained up and ready, which is a pretty quick ramp, they tend to stick around and work really hard, and they're hungry and learn quick. So we've been really impressed. Just as an example, Wiseline in its first year, once it really got its feet on the ground there, having learned from their experience at Uyala previously, they grew from 30 employees to over 200, and they're on their way to almost 500 by the end of this year. So that's kind of exponential growth you can get once you kind of get in and figure it out and learn where where and how to tap the talent there. And that's, again, one of the main reasons, really the principal reason we exist as an organization, is to make that really easy for companies. Yeah, we've been really impressed. I think it's only going to get better and better over the years. One of our main focuses as an organization is to build a long-term pipeline, right? Not just attract companies and help them now, but over the next 5, 10, 15 years, however long we are there, hopefully indefinitely, to build a very deep talent pool and pipeline, working with the younger kids from grade school and beyond, all the way up through the universities, improving the standards of the curriculum there, which are already quite good, but stand for some improvement in certain areas, and they're working real hard to do that, aligning better with industry needs, and just bringing those young people in the university more and more work opportunities. So in the next, I would say, 2 to 5 years, that pool of ready talent is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're quite excited.
Now on to immigration, a rather sensitive topic, I think, for the U.S. these days. We all know that obtaining visas for foreign workers in the U.S. is becoming more and more of an issue, given the new administration's plans on the subject, and the current issue being particularly the H-1B visas and the issues that the country is having with restrictions for foreign citizens from mainly Middle Eastern countries entering into the U.S. These issues may, however, prove to be an advantage for the developing tech industry in Guadalajara, as the visa process in Mexico may be a little long sometimes, but it's definitely a very manageable one. So first of all, what type of visas do we have here in Mexico? So there are 3 types of visas. You have your visitor's visa, which is known as the FMM. This visa is what you would have if you're just planning on visiting Mexico for a short period, so anything under 180 days. You have your temporary residency visa, which would be for 180 days to 4 years. So you can choose to apply for 1, 2, 3, or 4 years, depending on the time the employee or you are planning on spending in Mexico. And then once you've been in Mexico for 4 years or more on a temporary residency visa, you can apply for a permanent residency visa. So which one would you want to choose for your employees or yourself if you're planning on traveling down to Mexico? So if you're coming on a short business visit, then you can just stick with the regular visitor's visa, which unless, and we'll go over a few of the examples of the countries that need additional paperwork to obtain these visas, but if you're not from any of the countries in the list that we'll go over, then it's just a simple piece of paper that you fill in by hand. It's given to you when you're on board the plane. The immigration authorities, upon entering Mexico, will stamp it for you, make sure you don't lose it, and then you give it back to them when you leave the country on your way out. So that would be if you're planning on just short business visits. If your employee is going to be over for more than that 180-day period, they'll probably need to apply for a temporary visa. But if their payroll is going to continue or remain being in the U.S. without anything charged back to Mexico, and I say the U.S. or any other country, so if they're not on a mirror payroll or shadow payroll set up, then you can just request a temporary residence visa without any income being received by the employee from a Mexican source. If you are planning on having your employee here for a longer period, and they are going to be on a mirror or a shadow payroll setup, then you'd want to have a temporary visa with authorization for that person to receive a remuneration in Mexico from a Mexican source. So again, this is if your employee will be on a mirror payroll, which quite a few of our clients do have that set up. Important thing to know as well is that if you're a Mexican entity and you want to hire foreign nationals, there's a quota that you need to respect on how many people you can have versus your total payroll. And you must also have a registration yourself as a company with the immigration authorities. It's a pretty straightforward process. It's just a question of presenting all the necessary documents, and it's straightforward and easy to get. Okay, so as I mentioned, if you're traveling just on a regular tourist visa, so the FMM, some nationals will need to apply for additional permits to be able to have that visa. So countries that are in the examples would be Saudi Arabia, China, Egypt, Russia, Philippines, India, Taiwan, Turkey, Vietnam. There's a longer list of countries. These are a few examples. This requirement to have the additional authorizations to be able to have the tourist visa won't apply if your employees are in these circumstances. So if they're permanent residents of Canada, the US, Japan, the UK, or any other country within the Schengen area, if they have a valid visa for the US, if they have an APEC travel business travel card that's approved by Mexico, in those circumstances, then it waivers those additional requirements. Again, immigration rules in Mexico, they've changed recently, and they've become a little more time consuming, but don't worry, again, as it is the case for talent, they're extremely good, qualified advisors, immigration lawyers that you can refer to help you with the process. Each case being different, we would advise to obviously review them case by case with attorneys and also your tax advisors, because obviously you need to decide what type of visa would need to be requested.
Yeah. And just to complement what Laura's talking about, we've given kind of an overview here, and more or less that's where we end up. We still would need to do kind of a quick analysis to see, like, if the person will be here more than 183 days, if their cat and dog are coming with them, like the center of vital interest, and all that fun tax stuff to determine if you become a tax resident of Mexico. But one thing to note is that the government authorities, and this is at a state level, have the view and the commitment to really help the tech industry. Like they're focused, like obviously they're focused on fighting terrorism and criminality and all that, but they know that if a good company comes, like a tech company, like they will go out of their way to make the process as easy as possible, so that at the end of the day, jumping through numerous hoops, you get the end result that you want. So it is a process, but it can be achieved. Affordable cost of living in office spaces, and these are just some examples, like consumer prices, rent. I'm thinking rent in Union Square, more or less. No, restaurant prices, groceries. This is just a bit of information, what the cost is for different items.
Jesse, I don't know what's your input on cost of living in office space. What have you seen on this aspect?
I think it can't be overemphasized enough. It's probably outside of the talent in Mexico, and especially Guadalajara, it's probably the biggest reason people come. It's a huge benefit that my wife and I are finding, indirectly. We came really for this incredible endeavor that we're working on, that I'm working on. She's in a similar sector, but we're finding, wow, like we could live here as a family and do incredibly well, live a wonderful life, raise our child in an incredible environment for a fraction of the price that we pay in Chicago, let alone what we might pay in the Bay Area, where I have lived before. So it's a huge draw just from a personal lifestyle standpoint, not to mention if you add that up across 100, 200 employees, or even just 5 or 10. As you were mentioning, Bernardo, that burn rate is so critical, especially early stage companies. Nowadays, in mature ecosystems like Silicon Valley or other parts of the world, it's really hard to even get started and up on their feet, let alone survive, even if they're experienced entrepreneurs and have some capital, because the prices are so high, real estate and cost of living and talent. So it's a huge draw. I don't think we can overemphasize it enough. And it'll stay that way for quite a while. I think there's a window right now where it's especially affordable. That won't always be the case as much, but for quite a long time, it's going to be an incredible environment. One thing I'll just mention, I think in a very real terms, people that are looking to relocate staff or even, again, move themselves as part of the executive team of their company, we, just to make it very concrete, are looking at I think it's about a 5-bedroom house, the one we saw recently, in a beautiful community. I mean, this is one of these sort of gated communities with parks galore inside and kids running around, a pool, country club. I mean, it feels like you're in Beverly Hills, but it's very down to earth and very chill, relatable people, which I really like, especially growing up in the Midwest. So all the benefits of that for, I think they told us, no more than $2,000 a month for rent, which I couldn't believe at first. I thought they were talking in pesos, but less than $2,000 a month for a 5-bedroom corner lot in a gated community, and then you can extrapolate from there in terms of apartments of a smaller dimension in other parts of the city. So there's just so many neat communities. It's not just high-end gated communities. There's cute little, hipster type communities with shops and restaurants and cafes. It's just probably 5 or 6, 7 different types of enclaves and ecosystems from a personal standpoint, shopping and lifestyle standpoint in Guadalajara. It's pretty neat. I discover a new one, I think, every time I'm down there.
Thank you, Jesse.
There's also, of course, interesting, a growing multicultural environment. A lot of people, just the fact that, oh, I can get Indian food. Now I can get Indian food, or we have a Thai place, or we have several, like Laura's French, so she likes the French bakeries and stuff like that. I'm thinking of starting a blog on restaurants so that I can give my points of view, but there's definitely a very interesting, and my mouth just becomes like watering mouth. Like, we have a very good, and this is compared to Monterrey, Mexico City, we have very good restaurants, and they are cheap relative to other parts of Mexico. Like, I think we have a lot of restaurants here in Guadalajara that are as good or better than some in Mexico City at half or a third of the price. So we also have, with that restaurant update over, we have seen a huge growth in expat communities. There's already obviously the very large US expat, the Canadian. We have Indian, French, Japanese. There's even a Japanese school. There's a significant Jewish population, vibrant ethnic and national affinity groups. So with all this comes a number of stores and restaurants catering to foreign taste buds.
Thank you, Bernardo. I definitely like the French pastries. Jesse, what's your experience been regarding the cultural environment in Guadalajara?
The cultural environment, yeah. This is one of the big draws, again, from a personal standpoint for me and my wife. We have traveled the world and lived in a lot of different countries, and we happen to both speak Spanish, but even if we didn't, we would, I think, feel very comfortable. One thing I've noticed about Tapatíos, the people from Guadalajara, is there's a certain warmth. It feels like a small town. It's a big city in terms of the cosmopolitan, metropolitan nature of it, and the international cuisine and all that, but it still feels like a small town. People treat you like that. They're warm, welcoming. Just from day one, I've never, ever literally had one encounter so far that was rude. Now, other parts of the world and bigger cities, maybe it's just an inevitable trend, but it's definitely not like that. People are kind of running around crazy and busy and in their own bubble. There's still this feeling of almost like a small town. And yeah, I definitely can testify to that, Bernardo. The food is amazing. My wife's a real foodie, and one of the first questions she asked when we talked about moving down there was, let's go to some restaurants and check it out. I don't know about this. And she was pretty blown away. We have, in fact, this coming month, right, Cindy? A couple weeks from now, this famous chef who used to be the chef at Google, Chef Charlie. He's kind of a household name, I guess, in a lot of parts, especially in the tech community. He's coming down for a big visit, and it's created a lot of international fanfare. We'll have probably 5 or 6 different countries in this little international delegation. And he's really interested for one reason, this culinary reputation that Guadalajara has. He wants to learn about it, learn from it, share what he did at Google in terms of creating a really nice culinary environment for the tech community there. So we're really excited about that. If anybody happens to be coming to Guadalajara in the next couple of weeks, let us know. We'll include you in the tour. So.
One thing that always comes up, and I think it comes up because there was a lot of bad press a couple of years back with the whole war on drugs and everything, where the prior administration, I think, focused a bit too much on the negative and not on all the positives. And it got to the point where you turn on CNN and there was something related to drug violence in Mexico. And really, when you look at it, there are places that you don't go at 3 o'clock in the morning. I think if you're in Washington, D.C. or in San Francisco, there are places that you do not go there. And it's like any city, you have to be cautious, but there's no major problem if we'll look at it that way. Like, if you see the graph to the right, we can see where Guadalajara fares compared to Atlanta, to Baltimore, to Bogota, Cape Town, Chicago, New Orleans, New York. I remember we had a software provider that was going to plus some software, and they had to come do the implementation. And I remember that they were from Detroit, and they didn't want to come because it was not safe for them to come to Guadalajara. And this was I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And I laughed and I said, well, I just showed them the crime statistics between Detroit and Guadalajara, and there's no comparison. I should be the one feeling unsafe traveling to Detroit. Now, one thing that is interesting, in a survey by Global Delivery Report, the majority of foreign-born expats say they considered Guadalajara as safe or safer than their original homes. So I think that's important. Now, don't take our word for it. If you have any questions on security, this is the U.S. consulate information. Anyone not from the U.S., contact us. We can put you in contact with your consulate, or even give you general information.
Thank you, Bernardo, and I'll vouch for the security side of things. I've definitely felt less safe in some parts of Detroit than I do in most of Guadalajara. Jesse, how do you feel about security down here? What's your experience been?
I came actually with a lot of hesitation and doubt when I first arrived for exactly that reason. That was, in fact, the very first question I asked my now current colleagues was, this sounds amazing. I want to be a part of this. I want to, the project and the work and what's growing down there is unbelievable. But how safe is it? I've heard these things. I have some friends that, came out of Mexico and said, oh, I don't know about Guadalajara or the drug cartels. And so I really investigated, mostly at my wife's orders. She said, we're not talking any farther until you find out what's really happening. And I did. And I talked to a lot of people, and we've been down there many, many times now and spent weeks at a time. It is there, right? Not in the way that the media has made it out to be at all. There was a brief period, like Bernardo mentioned, where there was, because of the crackdown from the government to try to control things better, there was a lot of pushback, and that created sort of this state of violence for a while. And that has really gone away now, and now it's more like just any other big city. I think the biggest factor for us is we have a 17-month-old child, and that's more important than anything in the world, more important than any business opportunities or nonprofits or anything I could ever be a part of. So we've definitively answered that question, that yes, it's way far safe enough for us to be there. And coming from Chicago, I guess I have to admit it's probably, apparently according to the graph, safer than Chicago. So we are still looking at a variety of communities, the hipster type to the gated community type to others that I haven't mentioned, and all of them across the board, with the time we spend walking on the streets at night to the daytime to whenever has just felt very, very at ease. We stop and ask people for directions in the middle of alleyways between restaurants, and never have felt uncomfortable. So far I feel really like I can vouch for, honestly, for that. And when we get down there and live there permanently, I will update you on that. But it's one of the greatest attractions, I think, for moving there.
So it's all happening now, so tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I think what I'm trying to convey here is that there is something in the, I don't say just in the water, maybe there is, we're seeing now, after I've looked and spoken actually with so many of these old gray hairs, people that have been around for now 40 years almost, and were the ones responsible for building this layer upon layer of support for high-tech, first manufacturing, and then chip making, and now software, have seen the whole cycle, and we're really the ones responsible. Having spoken with them and seen it for myself, and being a part of now bringing companies down and seeing what their experience has been, how excited they get when they first kind of step off the plane. I remember this one gentleman, Nick, from a company that we work with. They have 500 employees. They work in 5 countries. They looked all around the world for where to start, and they met us, and we gave him a nice tour, and he was, we saw this sort of, by the end of the tour finally, he was kind of very skeptical. He asked all these very cautious questions, and by the tour and having met all the folks and gotten a sense of it for himself, there was this sort of glimmer in his eye, and I was kind of joke with him that he'd fallen in love, and I think he has. He's got a team now there of like 3 or 4 people. They're going to grow to probably 5 or 10 this month. So there's something, it's now the culmination of a long history. Didn't happen accidentally. It's not some fluke. It's just the natural flowering of seeds that were planted a long time ago. That's what makes it, I think, most exciting. Yeah, here on the next page, you'll see a little bit more about that history up more on paper that I described in the beginning, right? Starting with Kodak, through Motorola, Cisco, HP, Intel, Oracle. And again, as Bernardo said, it's definitely not just those IT type tech companies. It's quite a few others. And out of the ones that we're most interested in, the Wise Lines of the world, what's important to notice is that they're on this cutting edge field of technology with IT. That naturally spills over and is into and is absorbed by all these other sectors, right? Across everything from government to healthcare to energy to manufacturing. They're all beginning out, all these, some of them old companies, been around hundreds of years there, are grabbing on to this technology, and it's making them more efficient, kind of creating these spillover effects in terms of economic growth. The vision for the future here that we're so excited about, Wiseline is just sort of a catalyst, a seed that kind of started as we sort of compare it to a bit of a young Google that is now trying to create those conditions for other companies, is couple that with strong investment in infrastructure, the visionary public policy and leadership, all these other factors we've talked about. As more and more companies come, right, we have 7 in the pipe now, 2 or 3 already on the ground. We get calls and emails almost every day from another country. We have, I think, 8 or 9 countries, Cindy, right now we're in conversations with, so they're coming from not just Silicon Valley, but other parts of the world. I think the word is getting out, and we haven't even done any advertising whatsoever. We're just sort of trying to be a receptive, warm host. That's really our main role, not to kind of sell the city, although we end up doing that vicariously, but it's really just to be a warm host as people really learn about this, and we might put some actual media and publicity behind it. It's going to really accelerate this process. What you're looking at here on the screen is a sketch of what's actually being built as we speak. It'll be open in a few, early 2019, late 2018, so barely a year and a half, 2 years. And that is La Perla, Distrito La Perla, the Pearl District. It is one of several clusters, incredible urban development clusters. It happens to be where we are located, along with Wiseline's new campus, sort of a Google-style multi-million-dollar campus. It'll be all green space, new. Kind of that new urban design with parks and pedestrian walkways and restaurants and office space, obviously very tech-focused office campus space. Our tech center will be there, which I'll talk about in just a moment. That's going to be one of several clusters like Ciudad Creativa Digital, the digital creative city, which is this more national level project. It's going to take a few more years to finish, but is also happening. Couple all that together with the influx of talent, the influx of capital, the influx of technology. It's gonna be an incredible place to live and work. This is Gravity. This is our tech center for Startup GDL. It's where we'll actually physically be housed, along with the companies that come through our global growth program, which is basically what many of you, we hope, will participate in from all parts of the world, to at least for several months while they get their feet on the ground and figure out where they would like to expand more permanently in the city, where they will be housed. It's a 24/7 one-stop shop, co-working, demo, educational, training, event space. It's sort of a combination for those of you that know, like the Galvanized of the world, or the Bespoke, or those are what co-working spaces in San Francisco, or 1871 in Chicago, or WeWorks, obviously well known. Kind of a combination of the best of all those types of tech centers, where we can house the entrepreneurs themselves, of course, sort of the best of the best from abroad and locally, investors from abroad and locally, educators and training programs like the Endeavors of the world that help these entrepreneurs build their own capacity, business services like J.O. Del Rio and some of our other partners that help these companies get set up legally and financially, and even government representatives that can, in 1 day or 1 hour meeting, answer all your questions that you may want to have answered. So it's a place where we really create a marketplace of ideas, of talent, of capital, kind of like, I like to think of it as sort of those old Renaissance seaports, that from, I don't know, Amsterdam to Venice, that many people and ideas came in, exchanged value and learned from each other, then went back out into the world and sailed around the planet. Something like that is really happening, and so we're trying to give it a home. This will be complete by the end of this year, actually, so we're actually taking reservations for folks, whether they be entrepreneurs, companies, or investors, or anyone in that ecosystem that want to be a part of that and have office space there. We'll be happy to talk with you. Very, very excited, and this will be one of only of a handful. It won't be the only place to go. You can have your pick of the town.
Thank you very much for all of that, Jesse. It's all very interested, and we're looking forward to seeing this new development start taking shape.
Now, as mentioned at the beginning, this is the first installment on a 4-part installment, and if you ask us if you're really excited, and we'll sing another song, and we'll just give you another webinar. Up next will be in April. We'll be sending out the invite. Will be how to attract and retain the best talent in Guadalajara. The next one would be in May, how to take full advantage of any government-supported incentives. And the state government is really excited for entities to set up shop in Guadalajara, and they will be giving a bunch of support. And that's one of the things to note is that if you're thinking of setting up, like touching base with Startup GDL, touching base with us, can help streamline that whole process so that you get those type of government support, so that you go on a path that's already been cut. In June we have how to offshore software functions from Guadalajara the right way with no risk and at low cost, and we're talking about a lot of this is also the administrative side of things, and like how do I control, because at the end of the day talent people will say, yes, it's great, and the business people will say, oh, it's wonderful, and then you have to run into your whole accounting team and the tax team, and oh, but the big headache, and how are we going to actually logistically do all this? And so that's our June webinar. For more information, check out our website, texmex2017.jwo.com. Now, we do have time for a few questions. I'm going to read here. Do you have to have a work visa to work for a company in Mexico? Well, if you're not a Mexican national, then yes, you do. You have to have some type of work visa and permit, otherwise that company can get in trouble. The next one we have, I think, Laura, I'll pass this one to you. How complicated is banking in Mexico?
Okay, so banking in Mexico, it's not complicated. It's just a little time consuming to get the accounts open. It can take some time, but once the accounts are open and running, it's very easy to manage. Everything's done online, and most major banks have English online banking portals. If you go with bigger banks, they have a huge selection of languages that you can choose from for your portal, and they can be managed from abroad, which our clients have found extremely useful, so that they can manage their treasury from their corporate offices, wherever those may be. So not complicated, just a little slow to set up.
Yeah, and I have another question here, and Jesse, I think this one is for you. It's where will the shared workspace be located?
Yeah, the shared workspace physically at Gravity at our tech center will be one particular floor out of the 7. There's 6 floors plus the 7th, the terrace. It'll be concentrated around that early stage co-working space, etc. But all around Gravity in Distrito La Perla, which is that entire office campus, mixed use, residential shopping, park, etc. That whole 40-hectare space, one of the largest, if not the largest in Latin America. There'll be multiple spaces to work from. So the neat thing is that you can start there in Gravity and spend a few months, whatever you need to get firmly established. And even before that center is ready, we have space in that park. It's not going to be quite as glamorous and beautiful yet, but it's a nice temporary space where companies can literally this month, if they want, come and locate right next to Wiseline, actually. So if they need questions answered from us, Startup GDL, or from Wiseline as a fellow tech company from Silicon Valley, they can go literally walk 2 minutes across the campus to ask anybody on their team, from the leadership down to the engineers. And then later, as they grow, they can go out anywhere into that campus. Again, there's going to be restaurants, cafes, Starbucks, whatever they want, all around them, and anywhere else in the city. We're all about promoting the entire city. Again, this is one of several beautiful sites. There's a big shopping complex called Andares. There's the Ciudad Creativa Digital, the Digital Creative City. 4 or 5 clusters of really neat neighborhoods and complexes that are specifically catering to them. So short answer, start in Gravity on 1 floor, spend a few months, grow out from there into the office campus, right in the same area. And if you want to go other places beyond that, the city is your playground.
Another question here, so regarding visas, and the question is, what if you're married to a Mexican? Well, if you're a foreigner married to a Mexican, you'll still need to have a visa to be able to live and work in Guadalajara. You'll need to start off with the temporary residency visa. You can request one for 4 years, and then when those 4 years are up, you can switch to a permanent one. But if you're a foreigner, even if you're married to a Mexican, you will need a visa.
I think we're running short on time, so any other questions that that were sent that we didn't answer, we apologize, and we will be contacting you to answer them. This is our contact info with Laura, Jesse, and Cindy, and we have some additional reading for you. So if you have trouble sleeping or whatever, we have some additional reading, so take a look. And we do appreciate your time today. We hope you'll share this information with other people, and with our next broadcast, feel free to share them with whom you deem convenient. And with that, we bid you adieu. All right. Thank you.